Okay. So, the confusing. Well, people said the last video in the comment said that it was clear, and whoever's watching, at least whoever's commenting, for that to be clear, it's great because it means that what I'm pointing to with that is, let's say, noticed an experience, because that could potentially be extremely confusing, the way I was talking in the last video, because there is a strong belief. I went through this phase as well, that thoughts are bad, or thoughts aren't real. Thoughts should be avoided. And whilst the illusion that we're investigating is, that illusion is constructed in what is suggested by thoughts, the content of thoughts, what thought is suggesting as a reality about myself. Whilst it is in thoughts, thought isn't particularly ultimately the problem. It's the illusion that the thoughts are creating. It's this felt sense of me as a separate subject, as a separate entity, separate from all the rest of the world, and struggling to control my own circumstances and experience and so on. So I think it's really good that the confusing way I was talking in the last video was heard in a way that made sense for people. That's great. And it is kind of a misconception, and like I was pointing to in the last video, it's so easy to overlook that fundamental illusion, the illusion of this separate subject, because what's realized, let's say, is what you are transcendent of that also includes it, but it's also very paradoxical, and it gets really sticky and messy, and it can do, and confusing, because there isn't a clear experiential recognition of what's being created in thought as the illusion of me as a separate subject, and that's what leads to the resisting thought, or the struggling with thought, and so on. But the key to that, as I said, is what feels like you. What are you, the one having the experience? So if I was to ask anyone, what is it that you are? What are you? Well, the classic inquiry question is, who are you? But I feel resonate more with what are you? Pointing in a kind of existential way towards what do you feel like you are? I suppose most people would answer, would they think the question was stupid and it didn't make sense, but they would answer with a series of descriptions of identity. Like, so I do this profession, I'm this age, I'm this type of person, and so on. And the assumption would be that that question refers to the limited reality of the person, the character, the individual, and that's deeply felt to be the fundamental, most real basis of reality. Like, my reality, my experience starts with me being a person, being something separate from the rest of this mystery. And I can, forget and overlook those questions, that mystery, the existential, deep question mark, by accumulating identity, accumulating experiences or merit or possessions or whatever. But for example, if you were to ask me now, like, what are you, it's clear that there wouldn't be a description or a sentence, no matter how many words I was allowed to use, that would be able to capture that or describe that. But if asked that question, an experience, what I am, if you could so to speak, is clear, is obvious. So obvious to the point where asking the question doesn't even make much sense. Out with, some functional, useful, relative description that would serve a purpose for, communicating information for a purpose. But that's a good question to ask, to turn the direction of focus on this spiritual path back round towards, what is it that you are? What do you feel like you are right now? Not in the past, not in the future, but here, right now, immediately. What are you? What is this? How do you experience yourself? And when asking that question, see what the mind does, how the mind is conditioned to provide a response, provide an answer, provide an analysis or some sort of interpretation of what that question points to, what that question means. Any interpretation like that, any thought form that appears, only serves to inform a separate subject, inform the one who's trying to understand. Whereas I would suggest, in the sense that I'm speaking, the question points to something that already inherently understands itself, and that includes the thoughts. It doesn't exclude any aspect of experience. It's so hard to point to the directly to the illusion that I'm talking about when I say the illusion of the separate self, because it's a very real experience, but the reality of it as something that exists is not real. It doesn't actually exist. It's an illusion. Yet the experience of that is very real, and you could even say that about anything else in experience. The experience is clear. Like, whatever this is, experience-wise, this is it. But what is suggested in that thought experience as a reality, as something that is inherently real, as the basis or the foundation of my experience of myself, is fabricated, is an illusion created by thought. So when you ask, what am I? What do I feel like I am? The answer never comes in the sense that I'm talking about. Even though I use a lot of language, it never comes in the form of a thought, or a bunch of thoughts, or an analysis, or a conclusion that I can look at as something separate from it and be satisfied with that as an answer. It's an ongoingness that is inherently clear right now, in a time transcendent way, in a way that is timeless. Even though within that there is the illusion of time, the illusion of continuity. So, like someone said in the comments, a big part of this realization is the seeing clearly the thought and seeing clearly the conceptual tendencies of that subject, the tendency for it to relate to the world in a conceptual way, in a way that it finds comfortable, in a way that it feels like it's in control. But the very fabric of those thoughts, of those beliefs, or you could say the very substance of what that is as an experience, has a quality to it that is almost unrelated to the content of those thoughts. There's a certainty in it, there's a doubtlessness about it, there's a stillness about it, although it can be very dynamic at the same time. There's an unchangingness to it, there's a unifying quality of, I could say, sameness from one point of view, but it's not quite sameness because there's variety in it and the different forms of thought. Same with the senses. The quality that's realized, or what's realized in the let's say the space of thought or mind, is also realized, is also experienced clearly in the senses. So when exploring the sound, you can hear different sounds of different things changing and morphing and seemingly distinct or discrete from one another, seemingly definable, but at the same time there is a quality to all of that that is transcendent of any difference, any distinction that can be made in one sound or another. And that quality, that unifying quality of that as an experience, let's say broadly or in the non-dual sense, not distinct from any of the individual sounds, let's say, it becomes clear, and it becomes clear in everything, in all the senses. So when exploring the visual sense, there's a almost like a very hard to describe, a sameness, a singularity, a unified experience in the visual sense. There's a quality to all of it that completely transcends all of the differences, all of the different shapes and textures and shades and colours, and it has a still, timeless, static quality to it. But at the same time, it's not separate from the vast variety of different things and objects and variation. It's completely paradoxical. And this can become clear in experience, but it never makes sense. It's never something that can be described. But it's something that is incredibly liberating, and it's something that is so unifying, so whole, so close, that there's no way that you can even describe it. You could even say that all of the sound, all of the thought is one thought. There's only ever one thought. The sound, there's only ever one sound. And what's seen, there's only ever one appearance, one image. But it's not something that you can directly, it's not something that you can perceive from any sort of position. It's not something you can pinpoint and label and say, look, there's the oneness, because it's too immersed, it's too whole, it's too complete to be able to stand apart from it from any position and point to it in a way that the mind would be satisfied with. And it's almost too paradoxical to even talk about. So one scene, one, you could say, seeing, one image. There's only ever one image, but you can't even say it's a one image, because there's nothing else to compare it to or look at it from. Like, where are the limits to this? where are the limits to this? There aren't any. And you'll never find them. But like I said, you can embody it because you are that. And in experience, that becomes clear. The paradox becomes obvious, such that it's not even a paradox anymore. It's just what is. It always seems to begin, or it did for me, begin with the thought. There's this kind of unifying experience with thought where there's no longer two things. There's no longer me struggling with thought and the object of thought separate from me, that I'm relating to. The whole thing collapses, and then all there is thought, undistinct. I mean, you could even say that the thought and the not being thought aren't even two separate things. There's just, maybe you could say, a space of thought, and then that becomes non-distinct from all of the other senses, in a way. So then there's no longer a separate me looking at the seen world. There's just what's seen. There's no longer a separate me here hearing an array of different sounds distinct from each other. There's just sound, one scene, one thought, none of them being separate. And it's a place of it's a place of rest, but you're not resting in it. You're resting as it. As in the peace, the rest is inherent in it. Almost no matter what experience. And it's what's here in the relaxation of that which makes things look distinct. That which makes things look like I can understand them or know them. From any sort of point of view. And I get to the point where those points of view start to form, and then they just fall away. They form, and then they fall away. They're not even relevant anymore. The point of view isn't needed anymore to relate to reality, because there's nothing holding that point of view. I'm getting very close to saying there's no one here, radical non-dual message here. I don't know how I progressed to this, but I suppose my point was, it all seems to begin with the that initial illusion of me the thinker. That remains strong. When that remains strong, and that belief, the belief thought is there, that fundamental function of me as a separate thinker, me as the one struggling with my thoughts. When that collapses, it seems to lead to the rest of that same thing collapsing. And when what's here in the absence of that fundamental illusion becomes clear in the space of mind, let's say, it starts to become clear in the space of, I guess you could say, reality, until there is no longer a distinction between anything. Anyway, I'll go for now, but I'll talk to you next time.